Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and we can start the session now. Yesterday, we have covered quite a lot. We started with the project charter. We completed the project charter, then understood the stakeholder and their analysis. We understood how your project will progress through the team formation, conflicts when they arise, then you resolve the conflicts, then do the execution of the project, and then finally we do the celebration. Then we understood the responsibility matrix, where there are 4 major roles: responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. Then we developed the communication plan, SIPOC, and did the process mapping. The last, we learned about the cost benefit analysis, where we understood about the soft saving, as well as we understood the financial saving, which is in the form of present value, future value, net present value, internal rate of return, and the payback period. Today, we are jumping into the measure phase, and I'll start explaining with the data, because in Lean Six Sigma, everything we works on the data. It's a simple saying, I believe in God or I believe in data. So when you are a Six Sigma professional, if God is coming and telling you, okay, this is the way you should go ahead. Or data is telling you. Otherwise, in between, there is nothing. All right. So before I start the session for today, let me take the questions from you people. I'll answer your questions first, and then we'll proceed for the rest session. You can raise your hand, or you can type your question in the chat box. Yes, always.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Doing first class. So thank you.
Just a little confusion between two terms, that is ROI and break even. What is the difference between both?
Break even is the no profit, no loss. Whatever the amount you have invested, the same amount you are getting, which does not include any of your discount rate or the growth or the depreciation. That is the break even. You have invested 100 rupees and the same 100 you are getting back. Either you are getting after 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, doesn't matter. That is the break even. ROI stands for return on investment. So basically, if I say about the future value, here you invested 5,000 and your return was 7,347. So 7,347 minus 5,000 is the return on investment you put. So future value minus investment is your return on investment. That's what exactly the net present value minus investment is the return on investment. Question?
Okay, got it.
Puneet, your question is not clear. Are you asking future value minus present value, or you're asking future value and present value? Because future value minus present value, I did not explain anywhere, and there is no term like this. In this case, if you are looking for future value, what you have calculated is 7,347 is coming when you have invested 5,000 and lock-in period was for the 5 years. So if you are continuing with the 10% of the growth rate, your 5,000 on the compounding calculation after 5 years will become 7,347. That's what it is.
Hi, sir. So basically, I was asking about that number where it is typing up 2346.64. So I back checked the calculation. It is around future value minus the loan to friend.
Yes, exactly. Because
So
here
what is
you
this
have given
number
the
significance?
you have a amount which you have invested or given to someone 5,000.
Yeah.
If somebody is returning the same 5,000 amount after 5 years, where money should be growing, suppose 8% rate of return. So ideally, your friend should return you 7,347. But if your friend is returning you same 5,000 as a break even, which means as per the 8% of the growth rate, you are in loss of 2,346.
Okay, this significance loss, right?
Yeah. Salman, your question, please.
Right. My question is for the payback period. do we need to take the actual value per year or the net present value?
Payback period generally we calculate on the what we actual value we get as a break even. Payback period is basically break even, but you can calculate on both the way. But payback period we always calculate based on the actual value, what you are getting, not on the compounded value or not on the depreciated value.
But actually the value will not be 2000, it will be 1715.
Yes, this
If
is
you
your depreciated
Well,
value.
depreciated value.
But
So
we
the
will not be
pay-
calculating because payback period we always calculate at a break even. When there is no profit, no loss. So that number what we are getting, that is what your payback period. Payback means it's not compounded or it is not depreciated. It's value to value. There is no compounded calculation. Right, sir?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Then there is a question for, Acha, you asked this question only. Also need to understand IRR and the payback period calculation with Excel formula. Puneet, there is no Excel formula for the payback period. It's simple. What amount you have invested. After how many days you are getting the same amount back. Break even is your payback period. IRR, if you remember the definition here on the I have written, when net present value became 0. So you have a expected growth. As per the expected growth, if the same expected growth you are getting, when the net present value will become 0, then means it's a IRR. So yesterday I was showing you here, I was changing this value. Suppose the discount rate here, my expectation is 10%. So if money is growing by 10%, still I am in profit, which means my business is doing good. If your expectation itself is 28.65%, you see the value here. So then your net present value will become 0. That's what is the difference between the IRR and the net present value. Any more question? Payback period is different. Payback period is calculated in the time. And ROI is the return on investment what you are getting. So basically, when you are seeing the difference of your total gain minus investment, that is your return on investment. So in this example, if I say my total gain what I have, which is the example here, this one. So total gain I am getting around 3012 on my amount, right? Plus 5000 because this is over. So 3012 based on the discount rate, I am getting the difference. That is what my return on investment. So this is your net present value. Any more question? No? Okay. All right. So now we'll talk about the data. So anyone of you understand what is the data, people, by any chance? Anyone of you want to explain what is the data? Anyone? Yes, Jishan, you can speak.
Thank you. Data is the representation of the events
Hmm.
in numericals. In nutshell,
Okay.
I would say.
Not necessarily numeric, it may be non-numeric as well.
Yes. Okay. In that case, yes.
But yes, it's a collection of event. Haris, it's not collection of information. Data is converted into information. You are not collecting the information. It's a collection of event or observation. Right? So let's say what is the data? Data is collection of observations. As Jishan said, it's a collection of event or the observation. Why do we collect these observation? We will be processing with the help of statistical technique. So to be processed with statistical technique, to convert, why we are using statistical technique? To convert into meaningful information. And what do we do with this information? Information will be used for decision making. Informed decision making based on the data. This is what the role of the data. We are collecting the observation. We are processing these observation with the help of statistical technique, which after that it will convert into the meaningful information. Data will be converted into information. And this information we will be using for the for the business decision making. That's how we use the data. Right? Now, what are the type of data? Anyone? In Six Sigma, when you do the data study or you are taking the business decision based on the data, because as per the type of data, we'll be selecting the statistical technique. So what are the type of data? Jisan?
I think maybe it's a qualitative or some quantitative, measurable or non-measurable, or countable or non-countable.
Yes, these are the different type, as the first word you says, qualitative and quantitative, from where we will be starting. You are right.
Okay.
Okay. Always?
Always.
Always?
I had the same thing to say, the qualitative and quantitative.
Okay, great. So mainly we deal with the two type of data, as you say. I am dealing with the numbers. Numbers are quantitative. Or I am dealing with the text. Text is qualitative, right? These are the two type of data. Numbers we call as a numeric data, and text we call as a non-numeric data. Now, when you are dealing with the numbers or the numeric data, this can be further classified into two categories. And what are those? Anyone? Salman and Muneem has said continuous and discrete. So numeric data can be continuous data, or it can be discrete data. So now when you are dealing with the numbers, so what's the difference between continuous and discrete? Anyone? No? The basic difference between continuous and discrete, let me write a definition. When you have any data point which can be converted into meaningful unit, is continuous, else discrete. So any data point which can be converted into the further meaningful unit is a continuous data, otherwise it's a discrete data. This means data first has to be numeric, and the numeric data, with the help of that should come with a unit of measurement, and unit of measurement should be convertible. That's what the continuous data means. Right? So, example. Suppose you ask me, okay, let's say, what is your height? I can say my height is 180 centimeter, or no, my height is 6 feet, or no, my height is 1.8 meter. How does it make a difference? No?
Units.
Only the unit of measurement, otherwise the value remains same. There is nothing changes. You ask that what is the distance from home to office? You can tell me in the miles, or you tell me in the kilometers. Or how much time that you are doing the work. You can tell in the hours, or you can tell in the minutes. Or if I ask you the temperature, you can say in the degree, or you can say in the Fahrenheit. Nothing changes. So such kind of data, which is in the numeric format, and those numeric values can be converted into a further meaningful unit. It is a continuous data, otherwise it's a discrete data. So discrete data is a numeric data. But what we have in the discrete, it cannot be converted into the unit of measurement further. Example, if I ask you about the proportion. Proportion is the percentage data, right? Or if I ask you about the count, count is the n, how many? So when I say how many people are in the session, I will say, okay, there are 20 people in the session. Tell me, can we change to the further meaningful unit?
Coefficients.
Answer is no. You cannot convert the count. 20 people will remain 20 only. So these are the things that comes in the discrete category. So you have a numeric data, which can be continuous or discrete. Continuous means any data point which can be broken down to further meaningful unit. Otherwise, if you don't have a unit of measurement, that means it's a discrete data. Discrete can be count or percentage. Now let's talk about second category, which is the non-numeric data. Non-numeric data mainly we classify into three categories. Either it's a binary, or ordinal, or nominal. These are the three categories of the data: binary, ordinal, and nominal. Binary means you have only two forms of the data. Either you are talking about the yes or no, maybe good or bad, maybe pass or fail, or you mathematically you say either 0 or 1. There is nothing else. That is your binary data. Ordinal data, which means if you have 2 plus ordered categories of the data. 2 plus order category means if you have only 2 data set, like as binary it is. If you have more than 2 and they are in an order, then it's a ordinal data. Example, low, medium, or maybe high. Ordinal, right? Or you will say, let's say good, better, best, or let's say excellent. Many a time we do the prioritization. So priority for any task, 1, 2, or maybe let's say 3 priority. If you are doing the prioritization. So such kind of data is called as a ordinal data. Right? Now, if your data is in the text format, more than 2 category, and they are not in an order. You have more than 2 category, and they are not in an order, then it's a nominal data. So nominal is basically simple noun. And noun we know it's a name. Name can be anything. If I ask you that from which country you have joined, You will say India, you will say Pakistan, you will say I'm Bangladesh, you will say I live in Dubai, you will say I live in Abu Dhabi, Qatar, or any. So country names more than two, and they are noun or name, then it's a nominal data. If I ask you which brand of, let's say, laptop you are using to attend this session, right? So you will say I'm using Dell, I'm using HP, I'm using Lenovo, I'm using Apple, and so many, right? And which are the cities you are, what's studied, what graduation you have done, what is the level of qualification, and so many things are there. So any noun is a nominal data. And these are mainly the data that we study when we do the Six Sigma. So first we find out it's a number or text. If it is a number, then continuous or discrete. Or if it is a discrete, then count or proportion. Then if it is not a number, can be binary, can be ordinal, or can be nominal. Ask me any question in case any one of you have doubt till here. Because once you collect the data, you will be processing this data with the help of statistical technique. And with the help of statistical technique, what output you will get, you will be using that data for the meaningful information. Please repeat nominal. Nominal is the name of anything, Munim. It's a noun. Name of anything is the noun. Right? I said country name that you are belong to, or maybe brand of laptop, maybe brand of phone, your level of education, all will be the nominal data. An example of discrete, percentage or count, I think there is no example. I was telling how many people joined this session, Puneet, and it is, see, let's say 20 people are in the session, so 20 is the count, which cannot be converted. And if I say how many people joined out of total registered, so 20 people joined out of 35 registered, so that means it's a 57%. You cannot convert to further meaningful unit. Proportion will be proportion. Clear with the example now? So you have the percent accuracy, you have the productivity, you have the cost, and so many things. Just a minute, people. Hold on, please. Hey people, sorry, I'm back. I hope now Puneet and everyone, you people are clear about this. Okay, all right. So once the data we identify, the next thing, if data is not available, like as we used to create a data collection plan long back, when there was no ERP system, there was no computer, everything used to write in the pen and paper, and you will be collecting the data and doing the manual analysis. Then we used to decide the data collection plan. These days, all the data is just available one click away. All the data is in the system, right? So we can skip this if the data is available, but still we have to identify that what kind of data we need to collect. So first thing, let me explain you about, because our objective is to identify the root cause. So we need to understand that what kind of root cause and which stage, what do we do? Let me talk about the data only then first. I'll come to this later. Muneem, if it is two category, then it's a binary. You have only two options. Low or high, if you are saying good or not good, good or better, right? So 2 is always binary. More than 2 has to be, then only you will create a order. I hope it is clear. Still doubt, you can ask. So I was telling us before that if the data these days, all the data is very much available in our systems, in our computers and everything, right? But few years back when the technology was not there, so we used to create a data collection plan. So now what kind of data we have to collect, that we need to decide. So first thing, before we go for the data collection, we create or do the brainstorming or fishbone analysis. So fishbone analysis is also called as a cause and effect diagram, or this is also called as an Ishikawa diagram, because K. Ishikawa was the person who discovered this technique, which I was explaining in the 7QC tool. So what he said that impact on any variable, which is your Y, will be through the function of X, which we have understood, right? In the last session, we talked about the Y is equal to F of X. So the X, what you have here, these X's impact on the Y, that mainly at very high level will be through either we call 5ME or 6M, which means either the impact on the Y is coming because of the man means operator, the person who is working on the process or the machine, or the machine means which instrument you are using for the data collection, or maybe that may impact on the Y, anything machine, or the material means input, or the method, which means the procedure, or the measurement, the way we are collecting the data, or the last one is the environment. These are the primary thing that impacts your Y variable. We talk about this as a 5ME, man, machine, material, method, measurement, or environment. If the same thing, if I say this is 6M, so only the last thing, which is environment, we can call as a mother nature. Mother nature is environment. So any of the Y variable will be impacted by any of these 5M. So example, if I take, suppose anything is a Y for you, maybe let's say you are looking for, suppose let's say recruitment cycle time. On an average, how much time you are taking, right? You wanted to recruit or hire a person. So on the Y-axis or head of the fish, this is also called as an fishbone, I was telling. So why do we call this as an fishbone? Because this look like as an skeleton of the fish, right? So here is your head, is your Y variable. What? I am talking about the recruitment cycle time or the turnaround time. Let's say in simple word, I am writing recruitment days. So recruitment days is a Y variable and days is a number, and number is a continuous data. Days, right? Days can be in hours, can be in month, can be in weeks. So it will be your continuous data. Now, these number of days, if you are taking higher or less or more, whatever the number of days you have taken, that may be depending on man, machine, material, method, measurement, or maybe the environment. So we will be doing the brainstorming and we look at the data that what is something can impact from the man, machine, material, or method or environment side. This is what we'll be doing here. So now can you people tell me what are the things from the man or the operator side can impact, or what are the things can be impacted by the any other of these things? Anyone please? Can you suggest? If you have done the recruitment and the recruitment time is impacted by one of these factors, so what is something that is impacting? Okay. If it is not, you tell me simple word that why your recruitment time is high. What are the reason for that? I will classify into a specific category. Yes, Jisan, you can speak.
Yes, maybe there are multiple reasons, but the main reason may be the flow of the approval or recruitment process overall is slow, or
Hold.
maybe the time of I
Hold.
think that's
So here,
maybe the main.
I just wanted to write, let me write in this way and we can put it here because whatever you will say, I will note it down. So first thing you are telling the approval process. Approval process is a method, right? Now next.
Yes, method.
What else?
What else? Maybe the interviewer or maybe the interviewee. Maybe the shortlisting of the candidates is so weak. Maybe we have to conduct lengthy interviews. Or maybe the interviewer is not that skilled.
Interviewing skills is the measurement. Okay. Maybe when you are doing the calibration finally, after once the multiple interviewers are there, then again is the calibration. Maybe the recruitment day is high because of the distance of the candidate.
Yeah, maybe.
Right? Maybe it is because of the gender of the candidate. Maybe because it is the what we are looking, skills. Skills is a material. Maybe the platform we are using, like as MS Team or the face-to-face or something, that's a machine, right?
Yes.
Maybe the qualification you are hiring, that's a related to the person, individual. Maybe you are looking for the experience, it's related to that. And there are so many things, maybe like as you are looking for the certification, a specific certification. So all of these things we identify by doing the brainstorming one by one. And then we align that in a specific category, that which particular category it's belong to. Suppose these are the primary thing for me that have the impact on my Y variable. Y variable is the recruitment days. So now these recruitment days is here. as my y variable, and I have multiple x variable. Suppose x1 or maybe x2, x3 or x4. What are those? Let's say, if I say gender, qualification, experience. These are the three axes. Platform is the another axis. Skills and certification is the another axis. Approval process is the another X, and so on. I will be keep adding all of these things. Some value will be numeric, some value may be non-numeric. But ultimately, this is how the format you will be creating. That when I am going for the data collection, I will be collecting the data in all these things. So this data collection format, when you are creating, like as recruitment days, you have hired a person in 65 days. He was a male, which qualification is, let's say, BTech engineer, where the experience is 10 years. You hired through the platform, let's say monster.com. BTech engineer has a skills of the SQL. Certification he has done in the Python. And approval process is like it has to go for the 3-layer interview, senior person, right? So like this, I will be writing. And the similar way, whatever the recruitment you have done, for the n number of days, whatever the data you have, you will be collecting for the last recruited people. And this way, if you are writing a format you are designing, that means you are creating a check sheet. So before I explain the check sheet, let me read the question. So questions are no question. Jisan, you have anything you want to speak?
Yes, very short. I'm sorry, but I just wanted to clear about the differentiating between the Y and X. Why we are calling it this is Y, and Y is under the category of the X. I actually missed the point.
I'll explain you back. Here I was explaining this in this sheet. Y is the output, and X is the input, and F is the function. So if you remember Y output, X input, and F function, based on the recruitment process, what is the output we are looking for? In this example, you are trying to improve the turnaround time or the recruitment cycle time, number of days. So this is your output of the process. And this output, you are taking the high number of days more than expected because of some reason, which is the input. So because of maybe the gender wise, you are not getting a candidate, or you are not able to find a candidate who is a BTech qualified, or maybe you are looking for 10 years of experience, and the 10 years of experience for a BTech qualified as a male is not available on the Monster platform when you need this skill. Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you. I recalled now. Thank you very much.
So this is the format what we have designed is a data collection format, is called as a check sheet. So check sheet means check sheet is a specific designed format for data collection. You are designing a customized format or a specifically designed format for the data collection is called as a check sheet. When you go for the data collection, you cannot go directly for collecting the data. Before that, we need to understand the operational definition, because today you are collecting the data. You understand what data need to be collected. But tomorrow, if you are not there in the office and someone else is going to collect the data, so how they will come to know that what data need to be collected? So then operational definition has to be very, very clear. Suppose, let me ask you a situation. Question is, if you jump from an aircraft without parachute, tell me what are the chances of survival? If you jump from an aircraft or aeroplane without parachute, so what are the chances of survival? Zero. Now, I ask you the same question again. If you jump from an aircraft without parachute, what are the chances of survival when aircraft is grounded? So what will be the answer? Now the 100%. And that's only created difference when you are going to collect the data. Before we go for data collection, it should be very, very clear that what data we are collecting. So you understand the importance of operational definition. Suppose here I am talking about the recruitment days. You are asking because I have to do the project on the recruitment days I want to improve. So you are asking someone to collect the data for the recruitment days, or you are asking someone to collect the data for the recruitment days from the 1st Jan 2023 to 31st December 2023. Does it make a difference? Probably the second one is better, second line. Correct? Or if you ask to collect the data where only the male candidate I am looking for, then you will have more clarity. Or you collect the data for the male candidate who are engineer by qualification, or you are collecting the data for the male candidate from the 1st Jan 31st December, only male and engineer, they have at least 10 years of experience. Or I am looking for the pupil whose official notice period is, let's say, less than 60 days. So every time, whenever you are keep adding one or the other point, you are giving more and more clarity. So if you are assigning someone a task, they will be very clear that what data need to be collected. Because me or you being a Six Sigma professional, we don't want anything which is garbage in and garbage out. Right? So the data what we are going to collect should be meaningful. That's what we are going to do. Always question, please.
Yes, sir. Is it necessary to use all the 6 M's when we identify all the X's for our analysis? For example, in the example above, can you please call up? Yeah, in the a little more up. Yeah, in this example, the 4th M is method and material. 3rd M is material, and we have written skills and certification. The one thing I don't understand is how skills and certifications be material in this case. And for example, if we don't consider material altogether in this example, then what's the deal? As skills and certification can be shifted to the category of men. Like we have written skills, we can also write knowledge or attitude, and all these things are related to men. Why we are considering material in this case? And my question actually, there are 2 questions. Number 1 is how do we fit these skills and certification material? Number 2nd question is, can we skip one of those M's when we identify all the X's?
And answer is absolutely yes. we can skip, because it not necessary that everything will fit in every process or every project. We always study the process. Suppose you are looking for the recruitment days. In recruitment days, instead of material, if I replace it with the consultant name, suppose you have a third party. So you are hiring from Monster, you are hiring from Naukri, you are hiring from Naukri Gulf, you are hiring from the Job Street, you are hiring from the LinkedIn. That can be a separate thing. Or you can have a recruitment, the person who is a recruiter will come into the man. This is the person you are hiring. But it may depend on the recruiter as well. Who is the recruiter or what is the experience, right? Because one particular recruiter hire a person in the less number of days, or another one is a different number of days. You can have another thing, which is the for which geography you are hiring. So it is not, it is not mandatory that you have to stick to these 6M only. You can customize it completely. Sometimes you are using 1 or 2M out of this, but you have the additional factor. Sometimes none of the M will work and you have all the additional factor in many of the process, or sometimes probably these M only work. This example is just to understand, as per Ishikawa, he says, whenever there is an impact on the process at very, very high level, whatever the things you will identify, that will fall into these 6 category only. Like as recruiter may come to the man again. Geography may come to the environment. So he identified these are the specific category. But other than this, there may be additional category if you want to qualify, or you can stick to this category. Ultimately, at the end of the day, all of the category will fall into this, basically these 6 M's. That's how we explain these things. Now your question, please.
Okay, how if I shift skills and certification to the category of men instead of material?
It completely depends on your type of process. This structure of the data collection plan is completely dynamic, and we can customize as per our need.
Okay.
All right. All right. So operational definition is clear now to everyone. Any question from here? Now, when you are collecting the data, so another important thing is that what sampling method I should be using and what is the correct sample size, that how many data points I should be collecting in a statistical way. So sampling method, first thing you need to understand that what is the difference between the sample and the population. Any one of you want to speak? That what's the sample, what's the population?
Population is the total data and sample is just few number from them.
Yes, population is your 100% of the data. And sample population is 100% of the data. And the sample is a part of the population or subset of population. That's the difference between sample and population. Right? Now, suppose election is happening, and in the election, first thing is that why to study sample? Why not population? Anyone?
Yes, can I?
Yes, please.
I think sample, because the population, for example, 1,000 of the people, we have to take a one representative sample or any sample that represent the population. So I think the saving of the time, maybe saving of the energy.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Taking a sample. Yes.
Because testing population is too expensive. And collecting all the population is too expensive. It is time consuming, right? So to save the time and energy, we do the sample. That's the simple. Now, is the sample accurate? Always when you are studying the sample, so sample is what representing the population? Ideally, it should be. But it may not be if you are not collecting the right sample size and if you are not using the correct sampling method. So then, if your sample size, what you are using, and the sampling method you are using, if correctly chosen, then it is good. If all these things are correct, then you will say sample will represent the population. So what your sample is telling, your population will be the same. But in case incorrectly, neither your sample size is correct, statistically calculated, or sampling method is also incorrect, then sample will not represent the population. And if it is not representing the population, this thing is called as a sampling error. Sampling error means not choosing the correct sample size and correct population. Is called, not choosing the correct sample size and correct sampling method. It is called as a sampling error. So to avoid the sampling error, we always use the right sample size and the right sampling method. I will tell you what are the type of sampling method or what are the type of sample size calculation we do, which should be statistically representing the population. One thing which you should know here, when we talk about the population, which means population is 100% of data, which means this is your confidence level. So how much confidence you have in the result? If you are checking the 100% of the data, that means your confidence will be 100% only, and there is no risk because each and everything you are testing. So risk is 1 minus confidence, which is 0%. But when you talk about the sample, you are not studying the 100% data. Correct? So typically, when you are not studying the 100% data, in statistics, my confidence level will be 95%. If I am doing the 95% of the confidence level, then there is a risk of 1 minus 95, which is the 5% risk. This is most prominently used confidence level in statistics is 95%. Yes, always. Question now.
Is it possible that our sample size is correct, but sampling method is not correct?
Possibly, yes.
In that case, that is also a sampling error, right?
Yes.
So it's not necessary that both of them are incorrect, then we say that is sampling error. If one of them is incorrect, it can be sampling error in that case also.
There is a possibility. Either you are not collecting the right sample size or you are not using the correct sampling method. In both the way, it may result in the sampling error.
Understood.
Okay. So most prominently, we use 95% confidence level. But sometime depends on the criticality of the process. I may use, let's say 99%. I may use 90% or any other number as well. So according to how much is the confidence level, my risk number will vary. If you are using 99% confidence level, then you are taking only 1% of the risk. And if you are using 90% of the confidence level, then you are using 10% of the risk. And if you are using, suppose, let's say 85, then you are using 15% of the risk. So it will depend on what is the criticality of the process and what is your risk appetite. If your risk appetite is high, then you can go with the lower confidence. But if your risk appetite is low, then you can go with the higher confidence. As your confidence level will increase on the higher side, that means your risk is low. And when you are taking less risk, obviously your sample size will increase. So when we calculate the sample size, we use a constant which is called as an alpha constant. And when it is a constant, so please don't ask me from where this number is coming. So at a specific confidence level, there is a specific constant. When the 100% confidence, so constant is not applicable. But if you are using 95% confidence level, then there is a constant value which is 1.96. Or you are using 99, then it is 2.57. Or suppose you are using 90, then this value is 1.64. And these numbers, what I am taking for each of the confidence level, are very much available in your statistics books or in your internet. You can find it out. Question, please, now, Sirajuddin.
Sir, I just want to ask, I'm not talking about the numbers specifically, but I just want to ask that will this confidence level depend on the sample size? Like if we want to go for maximum level of confidence, do we have to always increase the sample size, or it's not relevant to that?
It is vice versa. As the confidence level will increase, your sample size will increase. Or if the confidence level is low, then sample size will be low.
So will this depend on the criticality of the project that we are going in through, or
Yes.
does it depend on something else?
It will depend on the how critical your process is. Suppose, what do you do, Sirajuddin? Let me ask you a question and I will explain in that way. What is your role in an organization?
Well, I'm working as a technical director.
Okay, you are a technical director and this is for the product design or something else?
Yes, that is for fabrication and manufacturing.
Okay. All right. Let's say I'll give you an example. You are maybe manufacturing some of the plastic component, let's say plastic lever. A small lever. This plastic lever you are selling to the two customers. One who is using in the toys, and the same lever is used in the medical devices. Same lever, exactly same shape, it's used in the medical devices. Is the criticality when you are using the plastic lever in the toys versus medical devices will remain same or it will change?
There will be a world of difference because obviously the sensitivity.
Right, absolutely, yes. So probably for the toys, you may go as a 90% confidence level, but probably medical device, you may need more than 99% confidence level. If you have a car, you are driving, suppose you are driving a Volkswagen, maybe Polo, maybe Vento, and you are driving in Dubai. You may go zigzag. You really doesn't worry about that. If it is hitting, not hitting, scratch or not. But if you are driving a maybe BMW, maybe Audi, maybe Rolls-Royce, maybe Bentley or any other car, so then definitely you will be driving more carefully, which means you have to drive it with more confidence. Correct? So it depends on how critical your process is, what the operation, how critical is the operation is. According to that, we will be deciding what is my confidence level. Now, any more question, please?
No, it's very much clear, sir. Thank you.
All right. All clear? All good?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem, sir. So now I need to find out if I have to use the sampling method. So any of the sampling method which I will be selecting will depend on your total population distribution. How your population is distributed, based on that, we will be deciding our sampling method. Suppose your population distribution is uniform. As you was saying, Sirajuddin, that you are doing the fabrication. You are manufacturing only one product. You have only one machine and only same recipe you are learning, always running, and only same product you are manufacturing. So you are expecting every product what is coming out of the machine will be the same. So in this case, we can use a random sampling. But in case the manufacturing is happening, you have suppose two factory 1 or factory 2, or maybe you have more than 2 machines, A, B, C, D, or maybe you are working in the day shift, evening shift, night shift, or maybe the material what you have used for the manufacturing, the product is coming from the supplier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in this case, there is a groups you have done. An ideal condition, you should not be picking up the random sampling. Why? Because if you are picking up the random sampling, you may end up picking up the sample from the same group only every time. And you should avoid that as much as possible because you need to check it with the everything. Right? So whenever you are using the groups of population, which is distributed in a multiple group, then we use a stratified sampling. Stratified means group sampling. First, your population will be divided into group, and then from each of the group, you will be picking up the sample. In case your population is for the continuous production, like as machine are running 24/7, and you will be deciding the sample at every interval, that is called as in systematic sampling. Which means, let's say machine is running, production is running, and you decided that after every interval, maybe you will say, as the 100 product will done, so 101 product I will pick up as a sample. Or let's say every 30 minutes you will pick up the sample as a regular interval says. So when you decide based on the production is completely continuous, and based on the continuous production you are picking up a sample, then this is called as a systematic sampling. And all of these three are the probability sampling, because each of the sampling there is a probability that something will come. Right? But many a time we use the non-probability sampling as well. Example of the non-probability sampling. Let's say it is called as a convenience. Convenience sampling means many a time you must have seen that let's say your supplier is sending always the material. And specifically you will see that whenever the material is coming from the supplier, in case there are few parts in the material, the supplier, in case any of the defect or defective parts are there, they are hiding somewhere. Right? And you have to pick up the sample. So you will, sorry, I am not explaining, this is not convenience. By mistake I did. What do we call this type of sampling? So, Judgmental. This is called as a judgmental sampling. Yes. So you already know about that particular person or the supplier, that they will be hiding the supplier. So you are judgmental. You are being judgmental about them. So specifically from a place based on your past experience, you will be picking up the sample. That is called as a judgmental sampling. Convenience sampling means easy to pick. Like as you go to the market, you wanted to buy the vegetable, maybe the tomato. So whichever the tomato will come first to your hand, you will just buy them as per your convenience. If I talk about the same full load of truck is there, and whichever the sample, because you cannot go inside the entire truck, so whichever the sample will come first to your hand, you are picking up the sample. From that part is called your convenience sampling. So these are the mainly 5 type of sampling method we use in the industry: random, stratified, systematic, judgmental, and the convenience. Ask me question in case any one of you did not understand. Sirajuddin, you can speak.
Sir, I just wanted to clarify about the stratified sampling, because I somehow could not understand when you were explaining stratified sampling. I'm a bit confused about that.
So here is the group which I have written, right? Let's say you are doing the production, maybe fabrication you are telling, and fabrication of the product is done from the 4 different machines. And all the production kept at the one place only. And somebody asks you, okay, do the quality testing of that. So if you pick up the random sampling from that, probably you may or may not test all the product which is coming from each of the machine. You may end up by picking up the sample whichever coming first or all, or maybe by knowingly or unknowingly, you may end up by picking up the sample from either the one machine or maybe the 2 machine. May not cover everything. Correct?
Right,
But
sir.
in case, because your production, you already know that it is coming from the 4 different machine. So ideally, when you are picking up the sample, you should be picking up the sample from the each of the machine. So you will be segregating your production as per the machine, and then you are picking up the sample from the each of the set of the production. That is what the group sampling or stratified sampling. Strat means group. Simple meaning of the strata is the group. Now you also for the question.
Thank you very much, sir. It's clear, very much clear now.
All right. Any more question, people? No? Okay. So now this is about the sampling method. Next thing we need to understand, if sampling method I have selected, then how much should be my statistically calculated sample size? How much should be my sample size? So now we are going to learn about how to calculate the sample size. Any question before I go for that? Anyone? I think somebody raised the hand. No? So when you are, yes, Munir, ask me please. Munir, question please. No? Who else? Jishan, you can speak.
Yes, thank you very much. I was just thinking the number. By the way, we have studied too many types of sampling methods, but you have covered just 5. So, is it? I mean, is it true that the only 5 techniques are used in Six Sigma, or maybe there are some other techniques as well?
You ask me any other technique, we'll roll up
For
into
example,
5 technique only.
okay, maybe the cluster
Cluster is the stratified or
sampling.
group. Group. Cluster means group.
Yes, same, yes. Or maybe some systematics have already done, or maybe quota sampling or snowball sampling.
Quota is simple. Group. Quota means you are deciding into the each of
Okay.
the group. So
And how
any
about the
sample you will say
snowball
that will
sampling?
roll. Snowball sampling is
Okay,
the
all
systematic
it's
sampling.
okay. All is fall under this 5. Okay, that's okay.
It will fall into these 5 categories only. Any sample
Yes,
you will say. These are the 5 only unique. Rest of the just synonym or the name of these sampling.
Sure. Thank you.
No problem. Munir, you have any question? Sheikh Munir? No? Okay. So now we'll select the sample size. So when we select the sample size, first thing you need to understand, let's say non-statistical way. Non-statistical sampling, we generally use the US military method. What is the US military method? US military method means, you remember in the 1942, 43, 44, there was a world war. And US was actively participating in the World War II. Right? And they were producing lot of weapons at that time. And it was very difficult for them to send those so many of the weapons to the battlefield without testing. Because the battle, if your weapon is not working, it may be fatal for their own warriors or their own soldiers. And because they cannot send any weapon without testing, so there was a short of weapon in the battlefield, or army was not getting the weapons to fight with the enemy. So then there was one of the sergeant in the US Army. He came up with the proposal that, boss, we cannot test each and every weapon, and we are short of the weapons in the battlefield. So what, can't we test some of them? And if those weapons are good, we can release the entire batch. And he proposed that we can do the square root of population and add 1 into this. That will become my sample size. So how? Suppose your population is n number. So how many sample you will take? Any random number 1, 2, 3, 4. So sample will be taking the square root of your population and plus 1 if I add, then I will picking up the 36 sample randomly. But this applies only for the random sampling when there is a distribution is uniform. Otherwise, you should consider a uniform distribution. Any other type of distribution, this will not work. Well, this is not the right sampling method. In case you have a different sample size, let's say, I'll say your production is large, you are doing many transactions. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This much number of transactions you have done. Then you can pick up approximately 1112 sample. Or if your population is very low, suppose 50 only you have done, then 8 samples should be good enough as per the US military method. But this is a non-statistical technique. If you look for the statistical technique, so as per the data distribution, data may be continuous in nature or data may be proportion in nature where you are picking up the sample. Then we'll be calculating our sample size. Because continuous data comes with a unit of measurement, so then there is a standard deviation in the calculation. So the number of sample for the continuous data we will be calculating when n is equal to Based on the confidence level, you have the alpha value. This will be multiplied by the standard deviation. This will be divided by the margin of error, which is called as a target. What you want to achieve. And whole square of everything will give you the sample size, where your alpha is a constant, which I explained you here. At 95%, it is 1.96, or 99%, 2.57, or 90%, 1.64. Like this, we will be using. SD is the process variation in the form of standard deviation. And target, you already know, which we represent as a margin of error. How much margin we want to achieve in a process. That is your target, means target value. Let me see. In case you are using a proportion data, proportion means if current defective you have, let's say 5%, 7%, 10%, 12%, 15%, and you want to reduce the defective rate from the X percentage to Y percentage, or vice versa, then we use a different sampling method, because for the proportion, we do not calculate the standard deviation. So this standard deviation will not be in the picture. We are directly dividing alpha with the target value. Because I have the proportion, so what I will do next, I will multiply this with my current proportion defective, and I will multiply this with the 1 minus proportion, which is the non-defective item. Then the sample size will be calculated for the proportion data. So in this case, you know alpha already, right? Constant value. We have the target, margin of error. And P here is proportion defective, which is my current process is holding. This is the way, or the formula we use the sample size calculation. Now, if I use the continuous data as an example first. So suppose, let's say, maybe your process transaction time, as of now, what you are using is, let's say, 20 minutes. You are looking for a target that my average transaction time should not be more than 5 minutes. Based on the past data, the variation in your process is, let's say, around, let's say, 14 standard deviation. So what should be the sample size? In this case, you need to pick up either you are meeting the target of 5 or not when standard deviation is 14. Where the confidence level or alpha constant, let's say 1.96 at 95% confidence level. So by putting up these value, can I calculate the sample size? Answer is yes. So formula for sample size n is equal to alpha constant multiplied by standard deviation divided by target value, and whole square of this is your sample, which means you need only 30 sample to pick up based on the sampling strategy, either the target of 5 minutes you have achieved or not, to validate that. In case, let's say variation is low in your process, variation is only 10 standard deviation. But at the same time you are setting up a target, no, my average time should not be more than 2.5 minutes. And you are using this value at 90% confidence level, or maybe process is critical, you are using at 99% confidence level as well. Same formula will continue. So for this case, you need 43 sample. And if the same value I use here, at 99, you need 106 sample. So as the confidence level will increase, your sample size will increase. There will be another question. What if your population itself is less than the sample size? If your total population is less than the sample size, so in case, if I say your total population is less than sample, so answer is straightforward, 100% sampling. Always your question, please.
Yeah, my question was actually related to the last statement you gave. My question was, what is the population size in this example that we have discussed? So it's actually what I found from your statement is it is independent. It's actually depend situation to situation, but we just need to calculate the sample size from the given values of target in the standard deviation and the transaction time. The sample size, the population size can be any, right?
Yes. Okay, right. Any more question, people? No? Okay, now let's talk about if there is no, yes, Jishan, you can speak for the proportion. Ask me question, Jishan.
Yes, please. Actually, I don't know. I missed somewhere that the transition time where it comes from.
Transaction time, like as you are doing some work, and I'm just assuming that you are taking for a task 20 minutes, but you want to reduce from 20 minutes to 5 minutes. Maybe you want to reduce further it to 1 minute, let's say. And standard deviation is, let's say your process is 6 and you are looking for 95% confidence level this. So number of samples 138. This is just your assumption that what target you are setting up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now if I use this formula for the proportion, so this thing will depend on, let's say first thing is what is your defective percentage as of now, and what is your target defective percentage. And now you need the alpha constant value. And based on that, what should be your sample size you want to find out. Example, if I take Syed Bilal, was you part of my day 1 session? And day 1, oh, you was not part. I think you should watch a day 1 video and everything will be clear when I explained about the sigma level. Okay, you please watch that. And then this sheet will will clear your answer. Okay. Now, defective, let's say as of now, my process which is running is generating around 12% defective. My target is that defective should not be more than, let's say, 8%. I want to calculate how many sample I need to pick up to validate either I achieved 8% defective rate or not. From the 12% to 8% I got or not. So this is the formula that will work. So if I use number of sample is equal to alpha, and now this will be divided by the target 8%. Bracket close, whole square multiplied by current defective 12%, again multiplied by 1 minus current defective, which is around 88%. So I will need approximately 63 sample to validate if I achieved from 12% to 8%, yes or no. So 12% is your current rejection rate, and target rejection rate is 8%, either at 95% confidence level if you have achieved or not. Then you need to pick up minimum 63 sample static. In case maybe you have achieved, let's say, 8%. Next target is your 5%. But confidence level is 90 now. So you will be needing 79 samples. If 8% to 5% you want to achieve at 99% confidence level, so the sample size what you have 79 at 90%, this sample size will increase to 194 because confidence level is high. You want it to be more sure, then you need to pick up more and more sample. If the same thing you wanted to check at 95% confidence level, then you need 113 samples by using formula which I have written. And that's the way these three methods we use to calculate the sample size. One as a layman method, which we also call as an US Mullecki method. Then we can use if the data is continuous or maybe data is attribute according to that. Question, please. Any one of you? No? Done? Great. So now the sample size part is over. And after some time, which is after the break, I will tell you that what to do with this sample once we have collected. So we need to convert this sample data into the statistical number. And we are going to learn about the basics of statistics. These are the terms which we are going to learn after the break. I hope it is okay with everyone. Right? Before I go for the break, just a quick feedback, how you people are learning. Are you people understanding? Is there any apprehension that you people have, which probably may help to improve the delivery better? Your suggestions are always welcome. The sample size is directly proportional to the accuracy. Yes, absolutely. You are right. Higher the accuracy, higher the sample size. Going good. Thanks, Musabin. Somebody raised hand? No? All
Yes,
right.
it was me. It was me.
Yes,
Yeah.
Ishant. Ask me, please.
From how can we give the feedback?
No, feedback. I'm just asking as of now from you people that how are you feeling about the session, how you are learning? Because ultimately we are live, right?
Oh,
And my objective is that you people should be learning well. So am I meeting your expectation or not? Or is there any suggestion which can help us all together, means you, me and everyone, that program can
Yeah.
be delivered in a better way? This feedback I'm asking.
Yes. Overall, the method is really conductive, and I'm also the professor, having a
Okay.
lot of experience.
Great.
So connecting, engaging online is a great thing. So in that aspect, we have learned from you, and as long as I have one feedback, since the course is too condensed. It is being comprehensive, made it just in 7 different sessions, right?
Yes.
In my opinion, I think there's a bunch of information, and the type of course in the Six Sigma is all based on the practice, right?
Yep.
It's not just simply learning from the one way learning. although you have created a very good environment that it's a two-way traffic, you are, creating, asking questions and you are engaging us very well. But I think it should have been an alternate days so that one should have enough time to have a digest and practice. And unfortunately, all we people are, at the job, we have, a lot of work has to do. So I think we are able to get, at least if I talk myself, that I can get only just maybe 1 or 2 hours. But I think that's not the justification. I think this is not justice for the Six Sigma. So the amount of information you are providing, and I think before getting into the next session, it should have at least a recess day for the practice. Not a recess day, I would say, for a practice day. This is what my feedback is.
I agree, sir, with you.